For decades, we have been living an illusion, a comforting, polite fiction that we whispered to ourselves while looking south of the border. We told ourselves that we were equal partners in the grand architecture of North American aerospace defense. We dressed up our relationship with the United States in the noble language of the NORAD alliance, of mutual protection, of a shared democratic brotherhood. But as an analyst who has spent the better part of my life dissecting the psychological undercurrents and strategic realities of military power, I am here to tell you that beneath that warm blanket of Allied rhetoric was something fundamentally unequal. It was an engineered dependency, a deliberate, structural subordination that Donald Trump's America had grown so incredibly comfortable with. They genuinely believed it was a permanent condition of our national existence. They thought they had us locked in. They thought we were compliant, dependent, a junior partner forever destined to ask for permission before we dared to secure our own skies. But something has shifted. A quiet, profound revolution of sovereign resolve has taken place right under their noses, and it fills me with an absolute, undeniable pride to break it down for you tonight. To understand the magnitude of what we are doing now, you have to understand the psychological suffocations of where we have been. Let us look at our aging fleet of CF-18 Hornets. For years, these incredible machines and the extraordinary men and women who fly and maintain them have been pushed far, far beyond their intended operational limits. We are talking about aircraft that have been stretched to the absolute breaking point, asked to patrol the most unforgiving, brutal, and expansive Arctic frontier on the planet. But the decay of the CF-18 fleet was never just a mechanical issue. It was a psychological weight on our national consciousness. It was a daily, visceral reminder of our hesitation, of our political paralysis, and of our deep-seated anxiety about displeasing our neighbors to the south. We were waiting. And what were we waiting for? We were waiting for the American solution. We were waiting for the F-35, the fifth-generation stealth fighter built by Lockheed Martin, championed by the Pentagon, and forcefully sold to allies not as one choice among many, but as the only inevitable conclusion for anyone who wanted to remain in the club. But let us dissect what the F-35 program actually represents from a strategic and psychological standpoint. I want you to look past the stealth coding and the marketing brochures. The F-35 became a cautionary tale that a self-respecting middle power like Canada simply could not ignore. We watched the cost overruns compound across budget cycles like a financial cancer. We watched the technical complexities ground fleets across the globe, and we watched the delays stretch across different political administrations. And across entire decades, the bill kept rising, but more importantly, the conditions of ownership became terrifyingly clear. And this is where the genius of the American military-industrial complex reveals its true nature. When you buy into that system, you are not buying an independent capability, you are buying a leash. Under the doctrine that became glaringly obvious during the Trump administration, it was made fundamentally clear that this relationship came with strings attached. Strategic strings, political strings, and commercial conditions that were designed to tie Canadian defense permanently to American approval. Think about the psychological impact of that reality. Think about what it means for the sovereignty of a G7 nation. It meant that the software required to operate these jets, to upgrade them, to integrate new weapons, or even to fully understand their diagnostic data, was locked behind American authorization codes, codes that Canada did not and would not control. Imagine a scenario, a genuine critical sovereignty crisis over our Arctic territory or our northern airspace, a moment where the very fabric of our national borders is tested by a foreign adversary. In that decisive moment, under the F-35 architecture, Canada would essentially need to consult its most unpredictable ally before it could fully and autonomously defend its own homeland. We would be reliant on American supply chains, American software patches, and American political goodwill. I ask you, as proud Canadians, is that a sovereign defense policy? No, it is absolutely not. That is a state of subservience dressed up as an alliance. It is a psychological surrender of the highest order, where we farm out the ultimate responsibility for our survival to a boardroom in Washington, a server farm in Texas. During those years, the anxiety within our strategic community was palpable. You could feel it in the corridors of Ottawa. Donald Trump's transactional view of the world had weaponized American commercial leverage. He viewed alliances not as sacred pacts of mutual defense, but as protection rackets. You pay the toll, you buy the American hardware, you accept the American software locks, or you face the consequences of tariffs, trade wars, and political isolation. He assumed Canada was trapped. He assumed we had no other geopolitical or technological avenue, but what Washington failed to account for was the quiet, calculating, and unyielding resolve of Canadian leadership, embodied in the strategic calculus of Mark Carney. I want to spend some time analyzing the mindset of Mark Carney in this context, because it is a masterclass in strategic patience and sovereign architecture. While the political theater south of the border was loud, erratic, and aggressive, Carney did not react with noise. He did not engage in the petty day-to-day Twitter diplomacy that defined that era. Instead, he calculated. As an analyst, I look at Carney's approach and I see the mind of a builder. He understood that sovereignty is not something you declare in a press conference. Sovereignty is something you build through industrial capacity, technological independence, and operational autonomy. Carney looked at the F-35 proposition and he saw exactly what it was, a beautiful, highly capable cage. He understood that if Canada locked itself into that ecosystem, we would be giving up the ghost of our aerospace independence forever. We would be closing the door on the legacy of Canadian aviation, a legacy that has always been defined by our ability to adapt to our unique, harsh environment on our own terms. Carney recognized that true power in the 21st century does not just come from the radar signature of your fighter jet. It comes from the unquestionable authority to use that jet exactly when, where, and how you see fit, without asking a foreign entity for the digital keys. He saw that the psychological toll of dependency was eroding our strategic confidence. We needed a reset. We needed a paradigm shift that would not only replace our aging Hornets, but would structurally emancipate us from the gravitational pull of the American military-industrial complex. We needed a solution that respected Canadian intellect, Canadian engineering, and Canadian sovereignty. And he held the line. He absorbed the pressure from the lobbyists, from the Pentagon officials who paraded through Ottawa, and from the political commentators who insisted that diverging from the American path was strategic suicide. He waited for the right piece to move on the chessboard, and then the paradigm shifted. It shifted quietly at first, but with a deliberate intensity that I can only describe as profoundly beautiful. Sweden walked into the room. When Saab formally presented its offer to Ottawa, an offer of 88 next-generation Gripen E multi-role fighters, it did not arrive as a standard defense proposal. Let me be very clear about this. It arrived as a declaration of independence for middle powers. It arrived as absolute, undeniable proof that an alternative world was possible. When I first analyzed the contours of the Swedish package, the psychological and strategic implications hit me like a freight train. This was not a vendor trying to sell us a product and trap us in a lifelong maintenance contract. This was a sovereign nation, a nation that shares our northern realities, our democratic values, and our deep-seated need for independence, offering us the tools to build our own destiny. Sweden understood exactly what Canada was suffering from. They understood the claustrophobia of American aerospace dominance, and so their offer dismantled every single trap that the F-35 had laid out for us. The Gripen E proposal was not just about the airframe. It was about the architecture of freedom. When Mark Carney looked at that proposal, featuring complete technology transfer, local assembly rights on Canadian soil, and a completely open modular software architecture, he didn't flinch. He didn't second-guess our national capability to handle it. He knew that this was the exact moment, the exact inflection point in our history, where we could finally cut the cord. Think about the sheer audacity and the quiet pride of that moment. The Pentagon had spent decades engineering a global supply chain designed to make nations completely reliant on American technology. They had utilized the F-35 as the ultimate geopolitical anchor, ensuring that allied nations remained permanently within their strategic orbit. And here was Canada, a country that Donald Trump had publicly mocked and privately dismissed as a compliant subordinate, looking at a non-American alternative and saying, "We can do this ourselves." We are talking about a fundamental rejection of the transactional bullying that defined that era. It was a moment of immense psychological liberation. We were no longer begging for scraps of industrial offsets. We were looking at a comprehensive blueprint for complete sovereign control. The anxiety in Washington must have been incredible. And as a Canadian analyst, I say that with a deep sense of satisfaction. They realized that Carney wasn't playing their game. He wasn't negotiating for a slightly better price on an F-35 or a few extra supply chain contracts. He was actively negotiating the exit of Canadian air defense from the American sphere of absolute control. He was calculating the long-term mental and strategic health of the Canadian Armed Forces. He knew that to put a Canadian pilot in the cockpit of a jet over the high Arctic, that pilot must know with absolute certainty that the entire logistical, operational, and software apparatus supporting them is controlled right here in Ottawa by Canadians for Canadians. This is the psychological core of what I am trying to convey to you tonight. For so long, we have undervalued our own strategic worth. We have allowed ourselves to be told that we are too small, too underfunded, or too technologically inexperienced to manage our own top-tier aerospace capabilities without an American chaperone. The previous narrative forced upon us was one of necessary subservience. But the process that led us away from the F-35 and toward the Swedish alternative represents the death of that narrative. It represents a mature, confident Canada standing up and recognizing that our geographic reality, our massive, unforgiving, beautiful North, requires a bespoke solution, not a mass-produced American compromise that comes with a kill switch held in Washington. We are witnessing the end of an era of psychological capitulation. The decision to step away from the American default is, in my professional opinion, the single most significant assertion of Canadian national security independence since the end of the Cold War. It is a testament to a leadership that refused to be bullied, refused to be rushed, and refused to sell out the future operational freedom of our military for the sake of a quiet life with a loud neighbor. Mark Carney and the strategic minds who orchestrated this shift recognized that true alliances are built on mutual respect and sovereign capability, not on technological extortion. As we wrap up this first deep dive into the history and the psychological warfare of this procurement, I want you to hold on to this thought. We are no longer the junior partner waiting for instructions. We have looked at the board, we have calculated the costs of dependency, and we have chosen the harder but infinitely more rewarding path of self-determination. We have chosen to rebuild our sovereignty from the ground up, starting with the very skies above us. This is not just a story about fighter jets. My friends, this is the story of how Canada finally decided to own itself again. And trust me, when we get into the actual mechanics, the Industrial Revolution, and the global shockwaves of what this Gripen E architecture truly means for us in the next segment, you are going to see exactly why the Pentagon has not recovered since. Stay with me, because the Canadian aerospace renaissance is just getting started, and it is a fiercely beautiful thing to behold. When we shift our focus from the boardrooms of Washington to the frozen expanses of the Canadian high Arctic, the entire metric of what makes a military platform successful fundamentally changes. I want you to look at military procurement not just as a cold acquisition of titanium and software, but as a deeply humanistic endeavor. We often forget that at the heart of every single defense strategy is a human being, a pilot, a mechanic, a logistics officer, a citizen stepping up to protect their community. For too long, the modern military-industrial complex has treated these individuals as disposable cogs in a massive, unfeeling machine, forcing them to adapt to overly complex, fragile, and dangerous systems built for corporate profit rather than human survival. But the choice of the Saab Gripen E is a magnificent, educational lesson in human-centric engineering and a profound act of respect for the men and women in uniform. We are not investing in a weapon of imperial aggression or global subjugation. We are investing in a pure instrument of deterrence, a shield meant to preserve life, secure our borders, and ensure that our people can sleep peacefully without the looming threat of external coercion. This is about healing the collective anxiety of a nation that has felt strategically vulnerable for decades, replacing that fear with the quiet, dignified confidence of self-determination. Let us talk about the brutal reality of our geography. Because our northern frontier defies easy comprehension, and it demands a level of human resilience that most of the world simply cannot fathom. We are talking about operating environments where the temperature plummets to -40, even -45 degrees Celsius. In those conditions, metal behaves differently, lubricants freeze, and human flesh can suffer severe frostbite in a matter of seconds. The American fifth-generation solutions require pristine, climate-controlled hangars, extensive and delicate maintenance routines, and massive logistical footprints that take days to organize and execute. They were built for wars of projection in temperate zones, not for the agonizing cold of a sovereign defense mission at the edge of the world. Now look at the Gripen E, the Swedes, who share our deep, visceral understanding of the merciless northern winter. Designed an aircraft that respects the limits and honors the incredible grit of the human mechanic. They understood that you cannot ask a ground crew to perform microscopic, highly delicate technical adjustments on a fragile stealth coating in the middle of a blinding snowstorm on an improvised road base. The Gripen E operates with a brilliantly agile, human-first architecture. I want you to visualize this because it is nothing short of revolutionary. We are talking about a fully re-engineered 4.5 generation multi-role fighter that can land on a remote, icy highway in the Yukon, not a multi-billion-dollar military runway. And when it lands, it does not require a sprawling battalion of specialized technicians flown in from another country. The entire operational readiness cycle, the rearming, the refueling, and all the necessary diagnostic checks required to get that machine back into the sky, can be entirely managed by a ground crew of just 6 people. 6 human beings utilizing standard accessible equipment, turning that jet around in under 15 minutes. Do you understand the tactical and, frankly, the human value of that? It means keeping our personnel out of the deadly cold as much as possible. It means drastically reducing the logistical stress and the severe mental burnout that plagues modern maintenance squadrons. It is a system built on empathy for the operator, prioritizing their safety, their efficiency, and their physical well-being. It is an aircraft that serves the crew, rather than demanding the crew sacrifice their sanity and safety to serve the aircraft. And then there is the heart of this beast, the new Rolls-Royce RM16 engine. This isn't just about raw thrust and fuel efficiency, though those are spectacularly enhanced to allow for long-range patrols across our vast northern territories without leaving a massive, polluting carbon footprint. It is about acoustic design, a reduced noise signature engineered specifically to limit the deafening, physiological trauma inflicted on the ground crews and the communities living near our air bases. It is a compassionate engineering choice that acknowledges the long-term health of our citizens. Coupled with an electronic warfare suite built by Saab and Selex that is designed to jam the sensors of virtually any adversary, the Gripen E allows our pilots to outthink and outlast threats without needing to rely on raw, destructive firepower. It gives our pilots the situational awareness to make ethical, measured decisions in split seconds, de-escalating tensions through undeniable tactical superiority rather than immediate kinetic destruction. Furthermore, the modular software architecture ensures that our pilots and our commanders have complete, unadulterated control over their systems. We are never locked out. We never have to wait for an American authorization code while a threat encroaches on our airspace. That software independence is the ultimate form of respect for our national intellect and our sovereign right to self-defense. But the brilliance of Mark Carney's calculation, the truly healing and transformative power of this decision, extends far beyond the tarmac. By securing complete technology transfer and demanding local assembly rights on Canadian soil, we are igniting a domestic industrial renaissance. This is not just about buying jets, this is about nation building. It is about community healing. For decades, we have watched our highly skilled manufacturing sectors bleed out, hollowed out by globalization and unequal trade agreements that outsourced our brilliance. We have seen working-class communities suffer the profound psychological and economic damage of losing dignified, meaningful labor. The Gripen E program changes that narrative entirely. We are bringing 10,000 research, engineering, and manufacturing jobs right here to Canada. 10,000 families who will be supported by high-level, intellectually stimulating and honorable work. We are creating an Indigenous aerospace ecosystem where a young Canadian student sitting in a classroom today can dream of becoming an aeronautical software engineer, knowing that they will not have to move to California or Texas to realize that dream. They can stay here, build their community, and contribute to the defense of their own homeland. We are retaining our intellectual property, compounding our technological wealth across the decades, and treating our workforce as our most valuable national asset. This is how you cure the economic anxieties of a nation. You give them the tools to build their own future. When you pull back and look at the global board, you begin to see why the halls of the Pentagon are echoing with a deep, systemic anxiety. This Canadian decision has triggered a geopolitical earthquake. For the entirety of the post-Cold War era, Donald Trump's America, and frankly the administrations before his, held a near monopoly on advanced Western fighter exports. But as we have discussed, that monopoly was never purely commercial. It was an architecture of geopolitical control. Nations that fly American jets remain firmly anchored, subordinate and compliant within the American strategic orbit. But Canada has just demonstrated to the world that an alternative path exists. We have proven that you can achieve top-tier, interoperable, NATO-standard air defense without sacrificing your national dignity or your sovereign decision-making. We are sending a message of empowerment to middle powers everywhere. Think about the profound humanistics lesson here on the international stage. True alliances, healthy relationships between nations, Just like healthy relationships between human beings must be predicated on mutual respect, equality, and consent, not on forced dependency and technological extortion. By walking away from the F-35 trap, Canada is showing Poland, Finland, Australia, and every other nation that is currently re-evaluating its dependency calculus that you do not have to be a vassal to be secure. You do not have to surrender your sovereignty to be part of a defensive alliance. We are breaking the cycle of geopolitical bullying. We are establishing a new paradigm where countries can collaborate, share technology, and protect their people while maintaining complete ownership of their destiny. Mark Carney's quiet, deliberate architecture has proven that you do not need to shout to change the world. You simply need to build something stronger, smarter, and more fiercely independent than the systems of control that came before it. The era of unchallenged, monopolistic dominance over the defense decisions of sovereign allies has reached its structural, moral, and technological limit, and it is a Canadian who made that ending inevitable. The skies above North America will never, ever look the same again, because from this day forward they are guarded by a force that is entirely, unapologetically ours. We have reclaimed our agency. We have protected the dignity of our service members. We have revitalized our domestic communities, and we have reminded the world what it truly means to stand on guard for thee. I want to hear from every single one of you on this. Does this strategic shift make you feel the same profound sense of national pride that I do? Do you see how investing in our own people and our own technology is the ultimate form of sovereignty? Get into the comments right now. Let me know your thoughts on the Gripen E, on Mark Carney's masterstroke, and on the future of the Canadian aerospace industry. Hit that like button if you believe in a strong, independent Canada. Subscribe to the channel so we can keep tearing down the illusions of international politics together, and I will see you all in the next deep dive. Stay vigilant, stay proud, and take care of each other out there.